So we're going to work on outlining, and we've talked a little bit about your topic outline, but mainly what we're going to discuss now is what's called your preparation outline. So if you haven't done your topic outline, go ahead, work on that. I can look at it now, or you can submit it tonight, and then I will take a look at it, and then I'll give you some tips or hints or guides of things that you need to look for what's called your preparation outline, which will be due in a couple of days. So your preparation outline will take a title, which you will take from your, all you got to do is take your topic outline, you copy it and paste it, and it'll become with your title, your specific purpose, and your central idea. And then for your preparation outline, which you did not have to do for your topic outline, we're going to add your introduction. And then you had main points, and then you're going to begin to splitting it up as well, what's called subpoints. So you've got your main points, and remember we talked about for this one, we've got 2 main points, and then you're going to go with subpoints to illustrate those main points. And then also you're going to put your connectives, which are your transitions. Remember we talked about internal preview, internal summary, your signposts, or your transition periods, and you're going to put those in between your introduction and your first main point, in between main points, and between your final main point into your conclusion. You will not need a bibliography or works cited for this one or number 2, but once we get into number 3, you will have to have works cited sources. Okay? So you're good that you don't have to do that for 2 of them. So in your guidelines for your preparation outline, you're going to, and again, you just go into your topic outline and you copy and paste it to where you have your specific purpose, your central idea, your main points, your general purpose, and then you will label your introduction, your body, and your conclusion. And we're going to talk about all that later. We've talked about introductions and conclusions, but we're going to even delve a little bit more into it once we get into when you turn in your preparation outline. But this is all getting you ready for all of that. Okay, so what you're going to do is use what's called a consistent pattern of symbolization and indentation. And if you know about what symbolization means, that's how you outline your topic with whatever situation that you're going to put with Roman numerals or bullets or whatever that you're going to use. But for us, we're going to be using Roman numerals for the main points, and then we're going to use uppercase letters for subpoints or subpoints, and then for subpoints we'll use numbers, and then we'll go to lowercase letters. So you're going to state all your main points and your subpoints in complete sentences, because this is actually your presentation, but it's not in a manuscript form, it's in an outline form, because that's what we want to get to. We don't want to read our presentation, we want to refer to our notes, so this is the first aspect that you do that with. Okay, and here you're also going to label your transitions, remember, and I don't have a marker, okay. Once again, you've got your introduction, and your transitions will go, your internal preview will go after your introduction into your first main point. Then you'll have your transitions in between each main point, and then you'll have your internal summary at the end before you get to your conclusion. And again, you won't have to attach a bibliography this time, but you will for speeches 3 and 4. And yes, you've already provided a title because everybody have a chance to see the sign-up sheet? Okay, good. So you're going to do what's called symbolization and indentation, showing relationships among ideas. And I don't know if you still do this in an English 101 class, where rather than just writing all out, you actually go to a situation where you go from a bibliography card to an outline and into a paper. But you guys, because of all the new equipment that you have when you talk about using Microsoft Word, it's much easier to where you just write a paper. But we're going to go the other way. And this is normally what you do in your visual framework. And we've already talked about having your two main points for your particular presentation as being what you're saying about that person, their characteristics, their achievements, or their traits, to where you're putting that point number one, point number two, and then you'll have your subpoints for each one of those that you are outlining. Now for this particular presentation, since it's only 2 to 3 minutes, you might not have any subpoints, but you definitely will once you get into number 3 and number 4 and possibly number 2, because those are going to be 4 to 6 minutes instead of 2 to 3 minutes. But you want to know this is how you do it. Now, if you plug it into quote-unquote autopilot when you go on Microsoft, it's not going to do it this way, and that's incorrect. We're doing it in an MLA style, and you want to make sure that you do it with these types of symbols rather than what Microsoft gives you. They give these little italicized little baby Roman numerals, and that's not correct. That's just not what we're using in an academic standard. So you've got to definitely do this on your own. And then you'll, of course, list your bibliography once you get to the third speech and the fourth speech. Okay, that's all you'll need. Now, once you get to the next aspect, which is called your speaking outline, so you've got your you did your TO, your topic outline, and you put all that information in very briefly as a skeleton. Then when you went to your preparation outline, you then plugged everything in to give it flesh, so to speak, to where you've written everything down that's about your presentation that's going to be in your preparation outline. And then once you get finished with that and you're ready to use your quote-unquote your speaking outline, you don't want to use your preparation outline, because if you do, you will just read the whole thing. And then you won't have good delivery because you're not giving proper eye contact and you won't have movement. So what you want to do is reduce it down to, if you had a 2 or 3 page preparation outline, then you want to reduce it down to 1 page. Okay? In which you keep the visual framework, okay, but you change it to where you could add some delivery cues, and we'll talk about those in chapter 13. And you want to use as little as possible. I'm going to allow you 1 sheet of paper. So if you've got a 2 to 3 page preparation outline, then you want to get it down to 1 sheet of paper. Now, this is old school because it's talking about making it legible, because some people used to use note cards. And you will see on some of our students that come on the PowerPoint presentations that you use note cards, but most people don't use them anymore. They just go ahead and print out 1 sheet of paper for their speaking outline, which is fine. And you're also going to have to turn in a speaking outline to me on the day that you do your presentation. And if you want to include delivery cues, you can, and we'll go over that when we get to chapter 13. All right, does anybody have any questions about the format for chapter 11? Okay, we also went over the outline process next time, but I'll go over it one more time before we get, well, once we're finished with chapter 14. Now, once again, this is not going to be a chapter that means much to you on the first one, but it will when we get to number 2. And it obviously will when we get to number 3 and 4, because we're going to be using information that you're going to put up on the screen. Okay? So we're going to talk a little bit about why you want to use visual aids, not just because I told you, but because we're looking at it from the point of view of why do you do it? What does it help you with? Well, the first thing, if you've got information that is difficult for people to visualize when you just talk to them. I mean, many of you probably, when you probably don't even ask anybody for directions anymore. You probably just go on your GPS, right? You don't even have a need to talk to anybody. So years ago, when you didn't have a GPS, you'd actually go and stop somewhere if you didn't know, and if you didn't have a map, and you'd say, could you give me directions? And then what would they do? They would just verbally tell you. Well, sometimes people still got lost because they didn't have a lot of visual landmarks, and that's why many of you, quote unquote, use GPS. Because not only do you see it, it actually talks to you, and you see it, if that's the way you like to do it. Okay? So it helps clarify information for you that normally you wouldn't be able to understand verbally. It's something that you have to quote unquote clarify, that's easier for you, because I mean, you've heard the old saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, if you've got a picture, then you don't have 1,000 words that you have to give information for. The next advantage is what's called interest. Now this is when, if you've got, because you guys are so visual, you're either on your phone or on your computer, or you're watching TV, or you're watching a movie, and you just cannot not touch it, because you guys touch your cell phones every 90 seconds because you're worried something's coming in that you need to see. Okay, because it's just too important, that you can't even not do it for an hour. Now that's just the basis of your particular generation. Other people don't really have, older people don't really have that problem. Although now I'm seeing a lot of, older people, older than me, that, when they're someplace, especially the older gentlemen who get stuck in the mall because they, are with their wives and the wives are shopping and they're on their phones now, whereas they used to just kind of sit and watch or read a newspaper. Well, now they're on their phones. But it does create interest for you because you're very visual, and you need that. You need that information that comes. Because how many of you would call yourself a visual learner? Anybody? Yeah, you just have to. We can't. And I will tell you, one of the things that did that is, have you guys ever seen Sesame Street? Ever seen Sesame Street? You ever watched that show when you were a kid? Yeah. That made education fun. And it had monsters. And it had video. And it had all kind of stuff that when you went to the classroom in your school, it was like, where's the monsters and where's the dancing and where's... And so, but you have learned from, lots of visual aspects. So that's one other reason that we use it. And most of the time anyway, you retain more information if you're getting it multimedia rather than just hearing it. You're also seeing it. And sometimes you actually, in some classes, in some situations, especially for a lab, you guys are even, hands-on. It's hands-on, which you might be a kinetic learner, which may be helpful for you. So those are just some of the advantages. Plus, it gives you credibility if you have worked on a presentation your whole time to where you did this really great presentation. You went and did the research. You found the information for whatever situation it might be, and that helped you when you got up in front of people and they went, wow, that was some really good information. Where'd they get that from? And I'll give you an example. I have a son who was, when he was in the 4th grade, they made him do a PowerPoint. I don't know if you guys did it that early, but they're starting very early now. He was in the 4th grade. And he had to do a PowerPoint on Ebola. You guys know the Ebola disease? Okay. Well, at first he just had a bunch of words on there, no pictures at all. And I said, well, doesn't your class want to see Ebola? I said, don't you want to see like the symptoms and the effects of Ebola? And he said, let's go look some up. And he found some really disgusting, horrible pictures of Ebola. Of course, as a 5th grader, he loved it. He was like, this is going to be great. And I said, well, you're going to have to give a disclaimer because some people don't want to see graphic situations like that. But, he got an A on it because he went and found, and of course he showed the map of where Ebola comes from, and then he showed some of the symptoms and some of the cures. So he went through a process which gave him more credibility through using that. And I don't know how many of you, but most of you enjoy, quote unquote, information that's done in a persuasive manner. This helps you show somebody. I don't know if you're one of these people that you have to show me information that's going to persuade me to do something. My father was from Missouri, which is actually called the Show Me State. And so for anything that you had to show him, you had to show him. And I'll give you an example. When I was in high school, earlier in his career, he was a basketball player that they got to the quarterfinals in the state of Missouri for his high school. And, he was ready to go out there and shoot free throws and jump shots and other kind of shots. And so, back in the day, they only used what was called a two-handed set shot. I don't know if you guys know anything about basketball in the day, but it would just be standing there and it was two-handed and you would throw it up like that. And so, of course, when we were playing basketball, it was easy to defend because he wouldn't do anything. And of course, I would just take the ball and do a jump shot and go right over him. Plus, he was only 5'10", and I was 6'2", so that was easy too to do a little jump shot over. And so that persuaded him that, well, because he said, they don't know how to play basketball anymore. You know, which I persuaded him, yes, they do. We're way ahead, okay? And so it's persuasive when you do things that kind of show people. Okay, so for your particular class, when you're talking about visual aids that could be used for a situation, you can actually bring in objects and models. Now that may be something particular when we do the presentation number 2 that we're going to look at. And we'll probably take a look at that tomorrow, actually. But when you talk about photos and drawings and graphs and charts and the video, they all can go on PowerPoint now. You guys have the great luxury of actually just pulling in information of all of this right on a PowerPoint, which makes it easier, but it also helps you gain all those things that we were talking about with credibility. Now, you can use you. I have seen people that use themselves in a situation, and particularly with what's called a procedure or demonstration, to where they're using themselves. It could be even a self-defense technique type of situation, or it might just be that you decided that one of your situations that you're doing actually is located on your person in some way. So those are things that you want to use that could be useful for you. And again, we won't be using those for the first one, but we will be for 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so again, this is old school. This is back before when it says enlarge for the audience and pass around. Now this may be something that when we do number 2, there might be some objects that you might want to show people, but you don't want to pass around some kind of keepsake or something that you have inherited from people that you want to show them, but it's probably not a good idea because it might get either lost or broken, so you want to avoid that. So what you do is you take it, when it talks about enlarging for the audience, if you've got, say you're showing a ring of some type, and then you take a picture of it and then put it on a PowerPoint, actually people can even see it better anyway because you've blown it up to where they can see it. So, and here's an example of something that if you were showing for someone who is called dyslexic. This is an illustration for, this is what people may see if you're dyslexic, which is an informational disability that you have that's not processing in your brain properly for words. And you can see this looks okay, but then we get is what a person with dyslexia might see when reading this sentence. And you can see how everything else, except for that one word, I mean, even the A, well, the A looks okay. The A's look all okay. I guess you can't really turn those around much, but C is SE rather than SEE, and it's a backwards S. And reading for us, they don't have the A in there, but this is what they would see because they can't process maybe an A in that manner, to where that gives you an indication when you're trying to discuss dyslexia with people, how they look and how they might see this if they had dyslexia. Okay, then you get to what are called graphs. And if any of you are taking a statistical class of some type or some other situation in business or law, to where there may be some statistical trends and patterns that you're showing in certain graphs, or if you even read a newspaper that gives you this kind of visual information, it's kind of like what are called economic indicators that are going on in the economy right now. They show you a graph and they look at it and they say, well, under Mr. Bush we had 7.9% unemployment, and then it went down to 4.9% unemployment with Mr. Obama, and now it's down to 3.9%. And they're going to show you on a graph. Okay? And here's an example particular of what's called a line graph. And you can say and I want to go back just to say, it discusses changes over time. That's the reason that you might want to use a line graph, is to give you information that's showing you a situation that's happening over a 30-year period. Okay? And you can see that in 1980, food was 20% of your personal spending. You guys spend 20% on food for your personal spending today? Well, you guys don't have to spend anything on anything though, right? Do you? Like do you pay? And here's another one, hospitalization and health care. See, back in 1980, it was much lower. You can hardly see it. It is a blue line. I don't know if you guys can see this or not. It's a blue line as opposed to the beige or brown line. But you can see in 1980, food was more expensive, or you spent much more money percentage of personal spending, as opposed to health care, which was about 12 to 13%, and then it goes up in 2010 up to 20%. So they flip-flop over a 30-year period. So what could be a cause for that? If you've got a line graph like this and you're showing it to a group of people, what could be a reason that health care is more expensive and food is cheaper? Say what? Technology in what way? Technology for health care? Okay, so in other words, I can get more done through technology rather than saying, hey, yeah, I'm going to listen to your heart and you need some medication. Because I don't know if you've seen, now they can actually have surgery with the surgeon that's not even there. He will take you into a little room and they will have robots in there, and he will be in another part of the world and put his hands into the robots at where he is, and actually the robot will then have surgery because he may have a talent to do that particular surgery that's not available. I mean, that's one, but that's really, really expensive too, isn't it? Okay, so yeah, that would be one. You're having a lot more, and that especially when you think about, I mean, I'm not going to, we probably shouldn't put this in a healthcare situation, but in 1980, basically a lot of people didn't have what was called cosmetic surgery, okay? And so say you're 35 in 1980, okay? Well, you're 35. Do you need cosmetic surgery at 35? You guys going to get some cosmetic surgery at 35? No facelifts or butt lifts or breast lifts or anything like that? Okay, no enlargements for you at 35? Okay, well, what happens when you get to 45? How about 55? You're going to have that. You think one of the jobs or one of the occupations that makes more money on the planet than anybody else are what are called cosmetic surgeons that live in Hollywood. Think anybody has any work done? You watch, there's a show on TV called Botched. You ever seen that show where somebody has bad plastic surgery and then they have to fix it? Or the guy who has like the Ken doll, the guy that looks like Ken the doll because he's had, I don't know, $100,000 worth of surgery? So I mean, I don't know if you include that. I guess you include that in healthcare. I'm not so sure. But at the same time, if you're 35, 45, 55, what happens to you from age 35 to 65? What happens to you? You get old. Yeah, what happens to you when you get old?
You get wrinkly.
You get wrinkly. So then that's when you need that cosmetic surgeon. Well, what about if you've been playing football from, say, age 8 and you play all the way up until you're 38, okay? And you've had, I don't know, 8 knee surgeries because you played for 30 years. So what's one of the first things you're going to do once you get rid of all those knee surgeries? What are you going to do with your knees? You replace them, absolutely. And that's what costs a lot of money. There was a quarterback that played back in the day by the name of Joe Namath who played for the New York Jets. And he had about 8 knee surgeries on each knee. And by the time he got to be 70 years old, he could not walk. And then they said, well, you know what? We've got this new surgery for you. We can give you new knees. Guess what? It's great. Now he can walk onto the field to get, whatever honor that he has, or flip a coin for a game. That was something that he just couldn't do even 15, 20 years earlier. So that is one thing that you talk about, technology. Hip replacements, knee replacements, all kinds of things for your ear, whatever it might be, okay? That's one thing. Anything else? Like you said, when you get old, you got to have more health care, don't you? Okay? You know anybody? You're shaking your head over there, Caitlin. Do you know anybody who's, you do? Because you're not even old yet. Wait till you get 65.
I've already had a knee replacement and already had.
That's just because that's because you're just abusing your body. You're not. But I mean, lots of people, because they don't take care of themselves when they get to this age, especially probably one of the biggie is blood pressure medication. Everybody that most of people that I know who are that age are on some kind of either blood thinner or blood pressure medication because they're not eating right and they don't have a healthy lifestyle. So, and I hate to tell you this, but I have two brothers that neither one of them got to 70. They all died in their 60s because they just weren't healthy. They both just had massive coronaries. Okay, so that's the reason. Now, why is food cheaper? You're what? Well, I mean, it's called mass production, right? Where do you get your food from? Someplace else, yeah, someplace else. Where do you get, potatoes? Grocery store. Where does it come from? Right down the road? Farm. What kind of farm? Where is it? What's the potato state? Idaho, right? Idaho potatoes. That's right, Idaho potatoes. You get your potatoes. Where do you get your tomatoes and your other fruit and vegetables from? Florida. Florida and California. That's why all this thing about immigration. Yeah, you don't get all that stuff right here, see? And I don't know if you guys know this, but basically the number of companies that own the entire food system, believe it or not, is only 6 companies. There are 6 companies in the world that basically dominate food. And because of that, they produce everything en masse. And when they do that, well, all they care about is volume, right? Do they actually care about quality? No, not really. But they could, but they don't. Okay? So with that, that's why you have a dollar meal at all these fast food places. Because what are they serving? Is it real food? Some of it's not. Some of it's not real food. Okay? And they do it en masse. So anyway, that's the reason food is less expensive and you don't spend as much and healthcare has gone up. Okay, well that's an interesting way of looking at it from a line graph. Okay, the next one is considered to be a pie graph, and you probably have seen those where they take 2 pieces of pie and they compare them by splitting up the percentages. And this would be 1. Now, ladies, this is women in the workforce. 1900, 68% of women in the workforce were single. Okay, so what happens in 1900? What did you do when you got married? You quit work. You stayed at home. Okay, and what kind of job anyway could you get if you were single in 1900? Some factories, yeah, not many, but some factories, yeah. That would be one. What would be another thing you could do? Could you be a doctor or a lawyer? No. You could be a nurse, maybe, if you could afford the training. You could be a teacher, again, if you could afford the training. Okay, but a lot of people actually, a lot of women just worked at what were called domestic workers. They worked in hotels as maids, or, because we're talking about urban areas too. We're talking about big cities. What kind of job could a single woman get in a big city? Well, you're basically, handmaid. Guys, if you don't know, in Asheville, there's a place called Biltmore House. You guys ever been to Biltmore House in Asheville? How many servants did they have at Biltmore House? Did you go to the servants' quarters while you were there at Biltmore House? Did you get the tour? How many servants did they have?
I don't remember, but there was like a lot there.
It was a whole floor, like 100, just to take care of one family and their parties. Okay, because we're talking about somebody who was a multimillionaire back at this time period. As a matter of fact, many people in Asheville were very happy that they came in there because there were people who were starving in the Appalachian Mountains in the Blue Ridge community at this time. There was no jobs, there was nothing to do, and you either worked on a farm maybe and made some and ate, but these were people who loved having those jobs where they served the rich because they actually gave them their own rooms. They didn't have to sleep in a room with 10 other people. They slept in one little room. And you're thinking, what? It's such a little room. They had their own bed, they had their own room. So I mean, for a lot of people, that was a big deal. That was a big step up, even though they were serving these quote unquote rich people and they had to dress up in the outfits and all that kind of information. But that's what happened. So you're talking about, now, when you go to 2010, look at the widowed or divorced who are still working. It's basically unchanged, isn't it? It shows you this and this. Now, single, not nearly as many. goes from 68 to 28. But look at the married. So what does that mean in 2010? Why are people working after they're married? Ladies, are you just waiting to marry somebody, or are you actually going to go have an occupation, and when you get married, are you going to keep it? You looking at me like, yes, definitely. Why? Why are you going to keep your job when you get married?
So you have money to go get your nails done.
Exactly. That is a perfect example. Absolutely. Got to get your nails done. Unless you got yourself a sugar daddy, your regular daddy's not going to pay for it, right? So he's going like, nails, you get your own. So you keep your job. And it might be a job in which you actually have to have nice nails if you're working in an office situation. Okay? You might be an attorney. You know, you don't want to go in there with, all horrible nails if you've got to win a case, right? See, and this is something that these people had dreamed of. They dreamed. Now, we're also looking at it from, if you guys know anything about the economic situation, is that we do have what's called the shrinking middle class. I don't know if you guys know that or not. If you're upper class, how much money do you make a year? If you're considered the 1%.
6 figures, I guess.
Huh?
6 figures?
Mm-mm.
More or less.
More. You're a multimillionaire. Okay? Or actually, there's a lot of billionaires. Okay? A lot of billionaires floating around. So, but they own approximately 75% of the wealth. The 1% owns 75% of the wealth, see? The rest of us clowns, are not anywhere near it, see? And that's why I talk about the middle class. There used to be a vibrant middle class, see? And, there's a movement in this country that you guys claim that you want free health care and you want free college, right? Don't you want free college? Well, that's what Bernie Sanders was pushing in 2016. And who's going to pay for it? Those dudes with the billionaire. We're going to tax the rich. See, that's what they've done in California. California is a place in which they were in bad economic system, okay? You don't get a 4-year college degree in California, but you get 2 years for free, okay? And it's all paid for, all those big Hollywood people out there, because they got a lot of money, okay? Billionaires. You let them like the guy owns Tesla, okay? Major billionaire, okay? Or the guy runs Amazon. He's become the richest man in the world now. I think it's ridiculous, like $100 million. Was it even more? $100 billion? He's got $100 billion. I don't even have $100. He's got $100 billion. I mean, what is that? That's because you guys buy stuff on Amazon. You get it shipped to your house. It's pretty good, right? You're going like, yeah, that's pretty good. And soon they're not even going to use workers. How are they going to ship it to your house? A little drone. They're going to send it to you in a little drone. Drone's going to come by your house and drop it on your step. Then you won't even need people working at Amazon. They'll just use robots. Okay? He makes a lot of money, but you can't get a job with him. You don't need a job, right? But anyway, that just gives you an indication. These are two situations that over time, again, 110 years of time from one aspect to another, and how it shows you the economic situation that was going on for 100 years, which is interesting. Okay, then you have what's called a bar graph. Now these are either horizontal or they're vertical, in which they usually have a tendency to only discuss two aspects, okay? So this is hard to see again. You can hardly even see the gray at all. But anyway, you get the idea that median household income, this is greater, 5234 is about in there. Infant mortality, there's a lot more deaths in this aspect than there are here. Unemployment rate, again, now we were looking at, this is 2000, it's probably based on 2008, because that's a pretty high figure for even, maybe it might be when Mr. Obama first took over, he was at like 7.9, but you're looking at these aspects between blacks and whites, and you're trying to do what's called the gap. This is the racial gap that a lot of people see in the country. So this is just kind of illustrating what we need to do about that. Okay, and I guess basically you're looking at college degrees. The more college degrees we have, the lower everything else will go, except for median household income. Okay, and then you can have what's called a chart, which basically just gives you list of information, such as this one. This is just a list. It's not anything like the pie graph or the line graph or the bar graph. You're looking at it from percent of U.S. immigrants and region of birth, which is Asia, Mexico, Europe, Caribbean, South America, Africa, Central America, and others. So that gives you an indication of, you know, who's coming to America. Who's coming to America? Okay, and one thing I would tell you about a chart, if you're looking at what's called a process, if that's one of the presentations that you might want to do when we get to number 3, is it has a tendency to do what's called a flow chart. I don't know if you've ever heard of that term before. A flow chart, which gives you steps of a process that goes from beginning, middle, and an end to the situation. Okay. Now, if you're going to use a video, which you're probably going to do maybe for number 2, 3, or 4, you never want to use a video that's longer than your presentation or a video that's even anywhere near the size of your presentation, because you have more to say. So if you're actually doing a 4 to 6 minute presentation and it ends up being your video itself is 4 minutes, then that's not good, because you have to talk for at least 4 minutes, and the video could be 2 minutes at the most, which will get you to the 4 to 6 minute mark. But if it's something where you want to make sure that it's quite short, then that's kind of what it's claiming. Usually a good short video is anywhere from 15 to 45 seconds, a minute at the most. And then if you want to, you can use yourself depending upon the situation. I have had people do dances. I've had people do self-defense techniques. I've had people do wrestling holds. There's all kinds of things that you can use just for your body to whatever the situation dictates in your demonstrate or your procedure, which you might want to use if you're going to do that for number 3. Okay, now as we move through PowerPoint, now many of you have learned how to actually make a PowerPoint, correct? All right, so how many of you actually used a PowerPoint in a presentation in college? You've actually used one. Okay, good. So they're doing a lot of quote-unquote what's called cross-curriculum, in which they are wanting to use this as a part of your situation in whatever classroom. Now, we're going to make you do it, particularly when you get to 3 and 4. And this is what information that I'm going to tell you on how to use a PowerPoint. Now, again, we're looking at it for number 2, 3, and 4, but you have to have a strategy for it. You can't just say, well, I got some really great pictures and I'm going to just throw it on there and that'll be good. No, you're going to do what's called enhance the specific points that you're going to make. So as you go through, and you'll see this when we get through and we start discussing the number 2 presentation, you're going to have to figure out a way to use a visual aid which is going to do this for you to enhance your specific points. And you don't want to use too many, because that gets bulky and it's more about the quote-unquote the slides and the PowerPoint rather than about you. The PowerPoint is what's called a support material. It's a tool in which you use to help you illustrate what point you're trying to make when you're with your presentation. So you don't want to use too many. When it says don't read from the screen, I have had some people that want to stand right here and point to the screen, and it's in right in your way, and you're going and you're having. So that's why I like to move. When you guys come up here, you'll be able to stand right here. And then if you want to really stand here and read from the screen's right here rather than there. So it gives you an opportunity to kind of look and say it as you go. Plus you're going to have a speaking outline anyway. Okay, so as you go through this, and when we'll start talking about number 2 and 3 and 4, as soon as you get your idea for your presentation, then you want to make sure that you start working on it, okay? And you want to make sure that it's simple as possible. You want to make it large enough. And this is one thing that a lot of people don't do, is they have too much text. They end up actually having their whole presentation based on their PowerPoint. They just write their presentation, their speech, out on there, and then they just read it off. And that's not what we're doing. I always write down on people to evaluate them. I say, use less words, more images. Less words, more images. Okay, and fonts. Fonts, you don't want to use too many fonts. You want to use effective fonts. You want to watch out about putting black backgrounds and blue lettering, or blue backgrounds and black lettering on top of that. I've had people have used two different types of greens, and you can't see the background, you can't see the words. So you want to watch out about using that in a way that works for you. Okay, here's an example of what I was talking about with the limited text. What you're doing now, this particular slide would be this size. So this photograph actually would be even larger than it is right now, which is not a bad size, but you're looking at it from this expands out to be the slide that you have here. And so you're looking for, quote unquote, there's only one font that they're using. They did use it as a different size, bigger than this one, and then they also used a different color. And they put this on a black background because the photograph seemed to come out better. And if you put that on a white background, because there's so much white, it might not show up as well. But you can see the whole point is, don't have so much text. You are telling us, this is just to illustrate what it is and to kind of get you going. So again, you're looking at effective fonts, clear and easy to read, a normal case. You only want to use 2 different fonts on one slide. If you're actually going to do that, I wouldn't even do that. I would use the same font. You want to standardize across the slides and properly size titles and body text. Now, hopefully that you've been taught that in a class which discussed PowerPoint, how to make PowerPoint slides. They may not have. They may have just said, well, here's how you copy and paste and create a PowerPoint. But I hope you understand that you're going to use all these rules as you go through when you create yours for us. Okay, and here's an example when you look for things, especially on a PowerPoint presentation, which those are really nice and cute and cuddly and funny and exciting for whatever a poster or a program or whatever it is that you're giving, but at the same time, it's hard to read. As opposed to these, which are especially Arial and Times New Roman and Verdana, are generally the easiest ones to pick up when you're trying to get just information across. It's easier to use those fonts. Okay, and again, I mentioned high contrast, easy. And you can see the PowerPoints that they've given us, that they've gotten from the text. They've got blue with white and black, and those are only 3 colors, well actually 2 colors that they're using. And it's high contrast, it's easy to see, it's a limited number, and again, you want to be consistent across the slides. You don't want to use different fonts as you go. Okay, and also strategic images. Make sure they're large enough. Don't make a big piece of wording right over here and then make a photograph that's this big. It's the photograph first, and then the image, and then the title included on the slide. Make sure we can see it. Okay, so you're going to display where the listeners can see. That's why we have the room set up like it's set up. That's pretty easy, especially, and it might be even something that you're going to be doing that's a model or an object of some type, that you definitely want to make sure that everybody's able to see it by coming to the center and showing whatever the object is, if you want to. But you don't want to pass it around, and you only want to talk about each PowerPoint as you go. I've seen sometimes people use what's called the timing PowerPoints, and they have a tendency to either go too slow behind it or too fast in front of it, so you don't want to use a timer. You want to just go as you're going, making sure that you're talking when the right slide is up. Okay, and again, don't talk to your audience, not turn and talk this way. And if you have an opportunity, which we will, you can have an opportunity to come in here and practice with your stuff in here if you want to, on days where we have practice days. Okay, anybody got any questions about outlining or chapter 14?